All right, my guest today is TM Lee, the founder of CoinGecko. For those of you who don't know, CoinGecko is the world's largest independent cryptocurrency data aggregator, and they have made a name for themselves as a key provider of fundamental analysis on the crypto market. Thank you very much for being here today, TM.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Pleasure to be here.
So I want to know, because this is an interesting space looking at the crypto market. Take me back to the beginning. How did you get on the entrepreneurial pathway to begin with? And what led you into kind of going down the rabbit hole of the crypto market and leading towards CoinGecko?
Yeah, so I think in terms of entrepreneur story, or at least the interest on it, it came when I was a teenager. I was inspired by the Web 2.0 movement. So at that time, there were products like, I think Twitter was up and coming, Facebook, a lot of social ads and stuff like that. So I think that kind of got me like really, really interested in what's possible on the internet, and that, give it access to a lot more information. So I got really interested in programming and always wanted to try to tinker and build some stuff. I eventually went to do a degree in computer science in the US, and while I was in college, I met up with some friends, and we ended up building a Southeast Asia flight ticket aggregator for fun. And I think we got a couple of traction here and there. But we didn't manage to turn it into a business, but it gave us a lot of learning points as well of how to run something from scratch in a scrappy way. Eventually, I moved back to Malaysia, and at the time, I wanted to still build something. I was looking around for ideas, and at the time, this is about like 2012, I think. I was looking to build like a SaaS product that I can provide some sort of a tooling online for people to just like use. Was looking for a payment provider, but I stumbled upon issues because there were no Braintree or Stripe or any sort of the payment provider you see today. So I ended up approaching like a local payment provider, and they told me that you gotta have like 500,000 ringgit or something like that in your bank account to get the paperwork going. I don't have that kind of money. I don't really not able to get that going. So in the end, I decided to shove that idea, and then I ended up like working on a job in Singapore. And what happens that in Singapore, I attended like a Bitcoin meetup, and I think that's where I started to meet like a lot of interesting people at the meetup, and really picked my attention on what Bitcoin is. And I ended up like reading up the white paper, and got really, really excited about what it can do. I'm always like looking for people to talk about it and discuss about it. That was when also I met my partner Bobby in Singapore when I was visiting by chance. And then later on, we decided to try to do something in the crypto space after like just narrowing down like what's possible. But looking at what Bitcoin is at the time, I thought it kind of like answers the question that I have when I was trying to build a SaaS product where I'm not able to find a payment provider, and that sort of like further clicks through like why I think this is like something that is up and coming, and I wanted to explore more into this space. Yeah.
Okay, so that's still quite early days in kind of the evolution of crypto. I mean, crypto has gone through a lot of ups and downs over the time, but you're really going back a decent length when your average conversation with friends or family, most people look at you like they have no clue what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like everyone thinks that the Bitcoin people are seen as the crazy ones, I guess. And I think we're still crazy right now. But yeah, it was very hard to find someone to just like talk about it and just discuss about it, which is why like the meetups, I think were like 30 people or so, and it
Yeah.
was really really grassroots, and I thought that was really fun. And I think what was interesting to me was I found some developers. So I think at that time there were a lot of meetups in Singapore that were targeted at startups in general and a tech stack and stuff like that. I attended all of them, but I think when I attended the Bitcoin meetup, it's a bit of a mix, and there are a few developers in there, and the developer myself, I thought like this is like an interesting niche that no one is sort of paying attention to, and I decided to just like be a bit of a contrarian and just dive into the rabbit hole there and see like what's up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a rabbit hole once you get going. There's a lot of layers to uncover. And so you get super interested in Bitcoin, you start getting really interested in, I think even at that time period, we didn't really say Web3 until a couple of years later, but you start getting really into that territory. And so how did that transition into kind of the product idea for CoinGecko? And what did it look like in those first days when you decided to start building something?
Yeah, so I think when we got in early days, it was main. So to the perspective I have is like, people are trading these coins and people are always talking about consensus mechanism. How can you create a better Bitcoin? It's all all
Mm,
those kind of things. Those are one part of it, and then the other one is like businesses, right? Businesses are trying to build products around the Bitcoin ecosystem. So there are like exchanges, exchange operators, point of sale system, remittance services and stuff like that. And then I think on our end, we're looking at like, there are potentially other products and business that we can build around this space. And we're just like going down the list. Like the most popular one at the time in about 2014, at least on the advent of the Mt. Gox collapse, like people were just rebuilding the space.
mm.
People were looking at building mining farms or mining pools, exchanges, local exchanges for fiat on ramp. So we also like gone down the list and trying to figure out what to build. And we ended up landing on a data aggregation business, which we thought that maybe we have some sort of advantage because we are not people who have like a large amount of capital to start an exchange or even
Mhm.
like dealt with regulatory issues and stuff like that. So we decided to do a business that is very intangible and that can scale across globally. So we started off by identifying like what are the problems in the data space. We realized that there is this sort of like information that's all scattered around, and we just wanted to make an MVP that brings all of those information together. Things like developer activity or community stats of all these different cryptocurrency projects that people are starting up, putting them all in one place and just making it easily accessible to people. It wasn't a price-centric market data from the start, but it eventually evolved into that. But I think that also allows us to learn about the space, make inroads in talking to more and more people, and then slowly gradually evolve the product into something that fits like the product market fit of what people want. So I think that's kind of like the starting point, and basically just trying to play to our strength of running something that we think we have an edge in. Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of censored on that data side. You mentioned something interesting that the starting point wasn't very price centric. So if you're talking about data, was it more on looking at volume? Was it talking about kind of the data around, during that time period, it was a bit like wild west where there were new like coin offerings, there were a lot of these different things that was coming out. Was where was the central focus of the data if it wasn't price?
So yeah, there's Bitcoin and there's all the other new coins that came out after that, Litecoin
Yeah.
and so on, and they're trying to solve new. I mean, even today, like people are always trying to solve new problems with tokens and coins and everything. And even up to today, or even at that time, a lot of the focus were on prices and market cap, and
Mm,
that's where everyone is paying attention to. And there are products and services that are doing that already at that time.
yeah.
And when we come in, we want to look at it in a different angle. Like there's all these different projects. What other data is important to researchers or traders, right? Things like developer activity. I mean, when a new project comes in, does it attract more developers coming in to build in that cryptocurrency, for example?
Mm,
Is there a huge community that rallies on it? So, for example, like Dogecoin, when it launched about in 2014, it doesn't have anything too fundamentally, it doesn't introduce anything too fundamentally new, but it has a large following of community compared to the other coins. So we were
yeah.
looking at all those kind of different stats and trying to bring them all into one place for the information of visitors or people who are interested in crypto in general.
Okay. Yeah. Now Dogecoin has Elon Musk's entire Twitter following
Yeah,
staying on
yeah,
on
yeah.
top of it. Okay, very very interesting. I think it's capturing some interesting data points. When you're talking about how many developers are coming in, are these things that are data points that are like on chain that you can actually find them to where maybe there's a DAO and it has like the specific kind of pseudonyms of who's involved within that particular aspect, or how are you capturing that data?
Yeah, so a lot of the projects are actually using GitHub to
Okay.
like maintain. So it's kind of like an open source project. So you can just look at the project and then look at how many contributors, look at the popularity of the project, look at the number of commits, pull requests, issues discussed. So that gives us a pulse of the activity. So I think at that time, like things that are written on chain are largely very simple stuff, like just transaction data,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
Ethereum hasn't really came to be yet until like 2015 or 16, if I recall correctly. And that's when with smart contract, things become even like crazier, right? So I think even for us, when we started CoinGecko, like we had to find a way to like go through every single phase of the cycle. Like we went from Bitcoin only world to Ethereum to like ICOs and then NFTs and then now DeFi and
Hmm.
there's very different cycle, and I think for us we're just trying to figure out how to adapt to the space. And as you look at the site right now, it's evolved to become like very very general purpose for what everyone imagined that they could what they can use CoinGecko for, more importantly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so when you're talking about kind of like establishing a product market fit for a particular audience segment, a particular customer segment, was the idea to go after kind of people that were actively trading, or who did you see as kind of that ideal customer persona?
Yeah. So when we started CoinGecko, we started off in Malaysia because
Mm-hmm.
myself and Bobby, we are based in Malaysia. I was working on a software consultancy project, and then Bobby was in a property development company. We keep our day jobs and we just keep this as a bootstrap project, and we didn't manage to we didn't go all in at the time. Mainly also because it was really really like crypto was really niche, right? So we kept it a
Yeah.
side project and just try to go in. So what ends up happening is that uh the idea is that even though we're in Malaysia, our target audience wasn't Malaysia. We see this as a global market. And because when you look at Bitcoin, it is money, and money is understood by everyone around the world. And
Mm-hmm.
we kind of get the initial thesis was that, yeah, anyone who understands money would eventually discover the value of Bitcoin or crypto. And then eventually they will need a data portal that they can look up information for. So we kind of know like this is like the possible TAM if these things were to grow. So what we ended up doing was a few contrarian things. A lot of the discussion, a lot of the information are written in English in
Mm-hmm.
2014, 2015. So what we ended up doing was to translate all the information into about 17 foreign languages. And we also support currency. And then when we get into pricing later on, instead of just looking in US dollars, we convert the Bitcoin price in like 20 over different major currencies in like Australian
Mm-hmm.
dollars, Canadian dollars, Malaysian ringgit, Singapore dollars, and whatnot. And this sort of like got people when they discover crypto or Bitcoin in various parts of the world, they realize that CoinGecko has information that is closer to their native currency or native language, and that got us inroads into getting
Mm-hmm.
more people to understand like what we provide, and then they become a community, they become a user, and for us to further iterate the product. And that's when we realized that we might be onto something. And especially so when in 2017, when we continue to keep it as a side project, we are seeing like exponential growth in our product. That's when we're like, okay, maybe we are really, really onto something, and let's try to double down. And in 2018, we made our first hire, we opened our first office, and we like turned it into a full-time thing. So I think that's kind of like how the transition takes place. It took like I think 4 years
Okay.
to discover product market fit and turn it into like a serious business. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you kind of getting to the point where you rode the wave, because to be honest with you, between 14 and 18, there was still that there was much more of a spike in awareness and activity getting into the time period where you're talking about in 2018, where mainstream news outlets were kind of all of a sudden attempting to speak it, even though they kind of stumbled over a lot of the
Yeah.
specifics. Very, 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 very interesting. So where was the first office that you opened?
Yeah, it was just in Damansara, like TTDI somewhere. Like we
Ah,
got
so
a co-working space.
okay,
Yeah,
okay, yeah,
yeah, we got a
it was here
co-working
in Malaysia,
space.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're all based here in Malaysia. Yeah.
Okay, okay, very, very cool. And is that still the case? The entire team is still based in Malaysia?
Not entirely. We ended up having to expand, and so we have satellite offices. Like we have a team in Singapore. We have a team of freelancers all over the world. So it has sort of like expanded beyond that. But of course, like the main operation is still like based here. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So walk me through, you get to this point in 2018 where now it's transitioning from side gig to primary gig. You've got your first employee, you're opening up an office. Um, what's next on that pathway when you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, now this is full-time gig, revenue model wise, what are you looking at in regards to being able to monetize off of it? Is it a subscription play? What's the revenue model in that early day?
Yeah, so from day one, our revenue model has always been advertising.
Okay.
So that's how we kept the business. So like CoinGecko is bootstrap even up to this point, and the reason how we managed to make it bootstrap is because we put in an advertising revenue model from day one, and it managed to
Hmm.
sort of pay off for its server and whatnot, and we never really like draw any salary from the business. Um, and when 2018 happened, I think largely was just responding to the market because the demand just sort of like grown exponentially. We see our servers breaking. We're not able to deal with like customer support, like, people coming in to ask questions like, "Hey, what's crypto? What's this and whatnot?" And we find ourselves struggling to even like meet that demand. So a lot of the thing was just responding and making sure that things don't break. And just continue to allow users to come in and get the information they want and grow from there. So that's largely that. And then we continue to have advertising as a main business model for a
Hmm.
long time until sometime last 1 or 2 years ago, where we decided that we want to introduce like subscription to sort of like diversify and make
Okay.
our business stronger and much more predictable, because we know that advertising is really cyclical. We have gone
Yeah.
through like two to three, I think three cycles right now, and we kind of know that yeah, there's going to be a down market. It's going to like weather the storm, but the
Hmm.
advertising revenue is impacted first, right? Even in
Sure.
the tech space right now, like you see that advertising is the first to be impacted in a
Yeah.
downturn like this. So we kind of anticipated that and tried to diversify with subscription, and we started it off with our API, because we've been offering the API for free for the longest time, and the
Hmm.
reason why we're doing that is also to sort of like help the space and sort of like democratize access to data, because a lot of developers at the time during the down market, you want to build something, you want to get market data and integrate into your apps. Like we want to make it as easy as possible for you to do that. But it's also come to a point where there are a lot of like abuses to the API. There's a lot of like DDoSes, and we
Mm.
want to make sure that this is scalable for people who really needs it. So we have like two different tiers. We're going to continue to provide the free public data, but we also have the paid version if you're doing something like serious, or you're running a business on top of it and you want a better like uptime, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to come back to the subscription, but let me start off with a couple of questions on the advertising, since that was kind of the early days of it. So there's I guess a couple of forms of the advertising. I think part of it is you can set up your Google AdWords or whatever sort of programmatic advertising, or you could also kind of go out and directly sell brands. Is it safe to assume that in the early days it was just kind of setting up the programmatic and playing off of the page views aspect, as opposed to trying to have a sales team selling agencies and brands directly?
Yeah, I would say even up to today, we do a mix of both. Even the early days, I think kind of both as well. Like whenever there's
Okay.
opportunity to do direct, like we would do it. Otherwise, yeah, we can plug it to the
Okay.
network, and that would be the automated. So yeah, I guess that the nice thing is that you don't really need a sales team behind it to plug into the network. But of course, sometimes depending on opportunity, right? So I
Mm.
guess we still do a mix of both back then, even up to today. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the programmatic's great kind of for kind of filling out the unsold inventory. So you get a much higher price point when you sell
Yeah.
direct, especially if you do like run of site and some of these other sort of different types of direct ad sales. Have you had challenges with, periodically over the course of time, you get adjustments to kind of the pricing mechanisms? A while back, Google changed the way their auctions were done, which kind of affected prices for a lot of publications, etc. Is that also a factor that played into you deciding the need to diversify, aside from the fact that these are discretionary budgets?
Mhm.
Marketing has a tendency of being the first thing to cut
Yeah.
in bad times. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's specifically to any changes from Google. I think largely I mean, things are largely okay for us, I think. And the reason why
Okay.
we want to move to subscription is to make it more predictable and defensible.
Mm.
Because yeah, like everything is like down, like crazy 90% or whatever in a down
Yeah.
market. And And as you mentioned, like marketing is the first to like the first thing that people look at to cut. And we just want to try to like diversify the business for long-term sustainability, and that will be like the key point. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about the API then. So like when you decided to start charging for it, you had mentioned that people there was some abuses, there was DDoS, there was these other sort of aspects. But when you were trying to figure out, okay, I want to monetize it, there's obvious questions in regards to trying to figure out who within my current user base of this API could I actually charge? And then there's also the question of how do I determine what I charge? What's the
Yeah.
price? Can you tell me a little bit about how you guys kind of thought about those two questions?
Yeah, I think it's definitely like running like a new startup within a startup when we were
Yeah.
doing the API business. So I think what we ended up doing was really like exploratory. So we didn't really immediately move to a self-serve subscription model from the get-go. We actually, I think there were a couple of requests that came in like, hey, they're looking for higher rate limits, they're looking for something more stable, they're looking for dedicated infrastructure. I think so there is like customer requests that we need to do something like this. And then what we end up doing was just jumping on a conversation with them, making sure that we understand what they need, and then just ask them like, hey, do you have a budget for this? And I think somehow we landed on a number that works well for both sides, and then that becomes like an anchor point for a particular like enterprise arrangement that we did with the customer. And then from there we decided that yeah, we won't be able to close or speak to that many customers manually. So we decided to introduce a self-serve, and we sort of like just price it in a way like that's based off what we arrange with the initial customer discovery, and then just land on some number and go with it. And I don't think there's any right formula to price things right. At the end is making sure that your costs and the cost and the amount that you charge the customer is sort of balance it out, that it work, the model needs to balance and work out well, basically. So I think this is what we're looking for. We want to make sure that this is also accessible to as many customers and users as possible. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And what was the mechanism in order to send them notifications? So you emailed out or something along those sort of lines and just kind of said, hey, here's what's going on. We're splitting free tier and paid tier. Here's the difference. Sign up if you want. That's that sort of thing. Or what was the messaging that you sent out?
Yeah, so the thing is that the API that we had were sort of like public. So
Ah.
that there is a difficulty in identifying like the customer,
Mm,
although sometimes we do know that some sites are using the API like openly, and then we do try to approach them. But I guess on our end is um whoever that we can identify, we try to do it. But if we can't, then sometimes, as I mentioned, like our free API is pretty unstable because it's public, right? And there is like all kinds of traffic coming in, and sometimes we have to sort of like close the API for a bit to make sure that things gets fixed, and then sometimes trying to impose some limit on some very suspicious looking pattern and stuff like that. And when we work with CDN partners, we also ask them like, hey, how can you help us like combat like all these weird things? And so I think like if the customer wants something stable, like they would generally gravitate towards a paid version because that has its own infra. And because it's a key and everything, it's less susceptible to spams and whatnot. So it's two different kind of product. And I think also because if developers are familiar with the API that we provide, the paid one is not anything too different. It's just basically adding a key, and then your app will just run as it is. Yeah.
yeah. It just kind of improves the stability. Is there a difference in the data set as well? Is there premium data that you're putting through the paid version?
Yeah, so we are definitely trying to iterate the pro API, and we are introducing some new exclusive endpoints that only the paid users will get. And but largely, yeah, I think because we start off with the free API and we migrate over, we also want to make sure that whatever that's available on the free is also available on the paid version. And yeah, so I think any sort of iteration or innovation, we will definitely like provide it to the paid exclusive customers first to let them to try it out and get like access to it. Yeah.
Okay, very cool, very cool. So when you're looking in your kind of product roadmap, what and to the extent that you're able to disclose, what is kind of your vision of kind of the next steps in the evolution of CoinGecko? What can we expect coming out in the future?
Yeah. So we see, we're kind of optimistic about the crypto space and the blockchain space, or Web3, like to put it. We see a future in the next like 10 years or so that there will be millions of tokens representing all kinds of assets, both digital and like physical, in the form of fungible and non-fungible. And if there's going to be that many tokens, then I think people are going to have trouble like making sense of all this data and information. And I think for us at CoinGecko is to continue to empower the space by building all the ancillary services to sort of like provide market data, provide information about all these different tokens. So we have also recently launched a relatively new product called Gecko Terminal sometime last year. And this is an on-chain first token explorer, which allows us to get prices and market data for tokens that are launched on the chain. And that allows us to keep up with the space. So largely is you see like everything is like data centric, market data, and we want to do this really well and like give this value back to the space, and that remains our focus. Yeah.
Okay. Is this terminal also a paid product, or is this something that's open?
The terminal is still open. It is open to accessibility, and the API is currently in beta, so it doesn't have the same stack as the CoinGecko API. We're still toying with a few features and talking to customers. Again, it's like building another startup within a startup, and there's a lot of trying to look for product market fit, customer discovery, and stuff like that. So it's currently openly available, and anyone can just like plug into the API and build something if they want to. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so you know, I'm sure I'd get a lot of messages if I didn't ask questions about like your perception of the overall crypto market. So if I can, let me ask you a few questions on that, because you know, right now I'm from the US originally. Right now it seems like a really bad time in the US from a regulatory standpoint. Coinbase just ended up suing the SEC and all of this. How do you see kind of the challenges of the geopolitics, things that are completely outside of your control? Do you see these impacting the level of interest from kind of demand for the data that's coming through your platform?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's definitely a key risk or a concern. And I think on our end is what we can do is just to observe the space and try to make our best guesses. But again, we will never be right about it. I think on our end, the barometer that we use is less so about the macro and whatnot. We use developer interest because we believe that what we are seeing right now, or at least in my opinion, like what I'm seeing right now in the Web3 space is very similar to Web 2.0 10, 15 years ago, where developers were coming in, building products and services on top of open API standards, and just mashing up different services together. And I'm kind of seeing that right now, where developers are coming to this space. All the data is on chain, it's protocols, and make use of that and build new products and services. And if that turns out well, there will be use cases there will be new use cases and problems that get solved, and that will pull people in to want to use these products, right? It may not be the kind of product that we are very familiar, like financial transaction or whatever. That could be one use case, but there could be many other use cases as well, like social media, governance, and there can be unlimited use cases for crypto in general. And that is probably like the measuring that I would use in terms of like what drives demand. And those are things that I think we can better control. But of course, there's a lot of like external factor as well that we have to consider. But this is like the main like thesis that we have, at least. Yeah.
Okay. And when you think on expanding on that thesis of there's new use cases coming out, you had mentioned before about capturing the relevant data for the particular use cases, as opposed to obviously price and all of that now is a component above it. But you talked about kind of the relevancy of, is it the number of developers? Is it this? Is it that? As new use cases come out, I'd imagine that there's an evolving set of what is the relevant data associated with new use cases, etc. How do you guys view kind of staying on top of that and maintaining kind of that leading edge of we're the topical experts because we're capturing all of this and maintaining that kind of the data aggregator?
Yeah, I think the space is big enough for more people to come in, right? So I don't think we'll be able to like be the one-stop place for everything because
Mm,
as for example, let's say gaming, right? If gaming were to be
yeah.
one of the use cases, the things that people look at in the gaming space in crypto is very different. Like you may
Yeah.
not be too concerned about floor prices of your asset. You want to know like okay for a given particular ability or traits of your in-game assets, you want to know prices, you want to know who's talking about it. So I think like yeah, generally that's a whole different subset of data that another startup could come in
Mm,
and be build that and be good at it. And I think for us, we want to supply prices, data, or anything. I don't imagine us doing everything, which is why like going back to how the API is powering the space is helping developers coming in focus on their use case. If you need prices, we are there to do the heavy lifting for you, and we want to do that really really well. Will we go into other data sets? That really depends on the opportunity and are we able to do that well or not? And I think if you get into the space, you want to make sure that we can maintain and serve the market at the best of our ability. But otherwise, core competency is always the thing that we want to sort of like make sure that we are good at. Yeah.
okay. So not looking at going down the specialist pathway in becoming the topical expert on things like gaming and other use cases, but more maintaining that core, the core of what you've been able to build, which is more generalized across use cases. Yeah.
That is at least like the core product. Like, I think for any company that wants to come in, I think from my realization is that if you want to expand quickly, you have to make sure that you can maintain all of them quickly as well because you just grew your portfolio of products, especially if they're not related to each other. It becomes very, very taxing, right? And I think for
Mm,
us, given the current climate as well, like I think every company is trying to make the best, trying to make like trying to narrow down their bets to the thing that matters the most. I think for us, kind of similar as well, because we never know like where how long this carbon climate is going to last, and when things are going to change. But we at least at the very base level, we are still going to innovate and try new things, but we must make sure that the core competency is always at its top. Yeah.
okay. Okay. Do you see, what one of the things that I've observed is that there's a lot more professional institutional asset traders, like
Mhm.
hedge funds and those types of institutions coming more and more into the crypto space. Do you see this changing the dynamic or perhaps increasing the demand for types of products like your newly released the new API subscription
Yeah.
pro package?
Yeah,
And
for
what are
sure.
you guys trying to do in order to tackle that kind of changing dynamic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of demand for institution grade data that is coming in. On our end, I would say that in the early days when we started off, we focused more on the retail centric kind of data. So there are some retail data that we provide that could
Sure.
be of interest to them. Specifically about enterprise grade data, that's something that for on our end we are evaluating whether to build that or not. And it's a very different use case altogether. They are only interested in very specific assets. They're not looking for the 10,000 assets that we cover. So that's even that itself is like a market on its own that there are other players that are good at that. And for us, is like, do we want to get into the space or do we continue to do what we are good at? And I think like the on-chain strategy is also like something a bit more contrarian as well. And yeah, I guess going back is that the space is just growing, exploding, and
Mm.
there's just many players that can get involved and choose the vertical that you want to be good at. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. For the institutional grade data, I know one of the things that I've heard discussed, and I'd be curious to get your opinion on this, is that because of the nature of Web3, there's a proneness to some of the activities that happen in kind of the public stock market sort of activity where you'd have things like pump and dump, you'd have some of these different ways to inflate asset prices where in the Web3 space, it can still happen, but because the data lift in order to identify those sort of activities is still relatively new, that institutions are more and more demanding kind of products in order to be able to kind of filter the BS radar kind of aspect of it. Do you see that within the community, or am I kind of going too far on a tangent there?
Yeah, I think there are various proposals on the table. I think some products or services out there are kind of doing that, or you could use a mix of different services, right? So as long as the transaction happens on chain to some extent, you would generally be able to like sift through the data. So like it could be transaction flows or behavior. I think there's some on-chain analysis company that allows you to do that. Then when it comes to the exchange behavior, and that's very similar to a traditional stock exchange, right? You can look at the order book, you can look at the trade that's filled, you can describe some trades that you think is too thin, even though like it moves the price, and that begets about that relates to liquidity of the exchange. So I think a lot of the things that were applicable there will also will be applicable here. Of course, when it comes to on-chain trade, then you start to look at the pattern and the behavior from the on-chain analysis company. So there are some other services out there that allows you to mix and match and try to get the best kind of data you want.
Okay, very interesting. So we've talked about kind of your outlook for the future, where you sit in, not going too specialized, that you wanted to keep open data in order to create more access, etc. So when you look at kind of the activities of CoinGecko and whether or not you guys are succeeding at your goal, aside from obviously the financial side of it, how do you guys define success as an organization when you're looking at accomplishing this mission?
Yeah, I guess on our end is there's always the mission of the company and also the business priority. So I think business priority, you go down to hard metric numbers, right? Like is the company financially healthy? Like is our subscription growing? So those are things that will keep the business going, and we have to have those kind of thing. Then the other one is sort of like the mission, right? Which is to empower the decentralized future with making data more accessible to as many people as possible. And I think for us over there is on like the market, the mind share of the market. Are we able to solve the problems for every user? If customers come in and tell us that, hey, your product allows me to do XYZ and get like benefit from it, then I think we feel good about it and we want to just continue building on that. So I think it's two very different kind of distinct metric. One is very measurable, one is based on the perception of the market, and we want to continue to, I mean, we look at both of this thing in general. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. This has been a super interesting conversation as kind of we've navigated, and I've gotten your opinion on the overall Web3 space as well as where CoinGecko is going. Let me wrap up here with my final closing questions, the questions that I ask everyone. And the first one of these is, what is a tech tool that you yourself cannot live without?
I'm trying to think like, let me see. I guess I use a lot of, so I think in the crypto space, generally we use Telegram as the main chat app in the early days. I think that has been a chat app that I continue to use even up to today. I don't know if it's because I'm in the space or not, but I'm seeing a lot of my friends coming in to use Telegram as well. But yeah, I think that's something that has been with me as long as I'm in the space up to today. But other chat apps, sometimes I forgot to like check the chats and stuff like that. But yeah, Telegram is one.
It's usually a giveaway of when you're exchanging contact info with somebody and they give you their Telegram. It's basically a giveaway that this is a Web3 person.
Yeah, but I think these days is not the case anymore. Like you're seeing more and more adoption
more and more
for
people
Telegram.
coming in. Yeah. Very cool. Last question here. If you were to talk to another founder that's getting started, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you could offer that new founder?
If the person is starting out, especially, I guess I'm going to give a little more contrarian advice, and also largely because it relates to my experience, which is if you want to start a startup, you don't have to go like all in. Like you want to do it on the side and test the water first. You can keep your day job, and I think you just need to find some time to work on your startup like outside of free time, right? And I think why that worked out is because sometimes doing a startup can psychologically like mess you up. If you go in and you're not seeing the result or traction that you want, then you can really affect you, right? So if you have a day job, at least you know that your day to day is covered, right? Your family or your food or your roof for your head, those are covered, and you can start to worry about the challenges in running a startup. But of course, that means that less time for it. But sometimes, even though you have more time, it doesn't mean that you can solve the problem like right away. Problems takes sort of like a longer time to seep in and creatively give you the idea to find out how to solve it. So long story short, if you start a startup, you can do it on the side. You don't have to go all in. And
Yeah, I definitely agree. Actually, the side gigging aspect is perfectly viable. I mean, there comes a point as the same that happened with you, where you side gig turns into the full-time gig. You have to hire employees, but it kind of is around that aspect of when are you seeing the point where there's enough of a product market fit, enough of a revenue opportunity that you can kind of jump head first. And maybe it's still going to be tight, but the starting point. I mean, most people can side gig it for a pretty good amount of time before finding that kind of inflection point.
yeah.
No, I think that's a little less contrarian than you let in
Oh,
with.
okay.
I was anticipating something much further along, but no, I really agree with that, and it's great advice as well, coming from somebody that's bootstrapped their way to where they're at as well. TM, I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody that listens in is going to get a lot of value out of this one.
All right. Thanks a lot, Kevin. All right.
All right, that wraps it up for another fantastic episode of the Sea of Startups. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Go onto iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. It's the best way for us to get discovered and to have these startup stories reach a broader audience. If you have any suggestions or would like to get in touch, you can email me at kevin@indelible.vc. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Brocklin from Indelible Ventures, and this is the Sea of Startups.